It's already 5:01, and as usually we want to start on time. We're 1 minute late. So let's get going. Welcome everybody. Welcome to another event. I hope you have a more optimistic week and the more quiet weekend ahead because of all this 1st of May. I should have been in on the seaside by now, but you know, these things, this little virus coming along. So, but I'm glad we're all together. We spend this time between friends. First of all, let me, like usual, share with you our partners, as they've been along with us all along, and we really appreciate. A big thank to all of you, all of them from Bucharest or from Cluj. Thank you for staying with us and for believing in us. We believe in you, and it's a great ride together. Like usual, please turn the microphones off. We're gonna turn them back on with questions. Our guests today agreed, and they said that we can interrupt them at any time with questions, so we can challenge them with I don't know, ideas and different views or questions that we have to their stories. We gonna have next event with our friend Alina. She's been with us before in our forum when she was telling us, you know, how to see those signs about a recession. And we're gonna have a chance to listen to her right now on Tuesday, the 5th. Today, you know, those places where those places where you get in the plane and you always look left. You have to go right, but you always look left. And there's the cockpit. And we all, from small kids, think, or at least I was thinking, that I want to, you know, go left for once and play around with all those buttons. I've been there a few times, even though on my 208 it's kind of you know, tough. But today we're gonna have a chance to actually go to the left. We will do that with our guests, Octavian, Pantis, and Captain Emil Dobrovolschi. Emil has been a pilot at Tarom for a while, since '94, and he moved up through all the professional ranks, from the small planes to the big planes. He also have a vast experience in management. He was serving as different operational and corporate leadership positions inside Tarom. Went up to vice president and director of flight operations. And Octavian Pantis is one of the most popular Romanian business authors. He wrote Musai List in 2012, which is one of the best books on time management. It's a best-selling book in Romania on productivity and work-life balance. So if you didn't have the chance to take that book and read that book, please pick it up. He also wrote 4 audiobooks on time management, practical leadership, change management, and communication skills, and is co-author of the book Shift, published worldwide in English. But we'll talk about today about the cockpit. And the cockpit hopefully is not very dark, but the book Dark Cockpit, written by both of them. It's an experience through a place that not a lot of us went, and it's full of processes and advices of you know, those verified information and processes that it's required in that place, but also translated into the business. So if you have a chance, I highly recommend the book. please pick it up. I would take it. Okay. So welcome today to our guests, Octavian and Emil. Please welcome, guys.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome.
Good evening.
I'll leave it to you, Octavian, to start.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for making time to talk about flying in turbulent times. Let me start with the question, because my assumption is that for many of you, flying was, and being in a plane was almost like a second home in the last years, not as much in the last month, but in the last years. So the question is this: were you ever in a flight and captain was speaking and you could not understand a word of what he was saying? Did that happen to you? I think it did.
Yes, especially in Africa.
In Africa, but also in Europe and also in the US. And sometimes when I was sitting in the airplane seat, I was thinking maybe they hold their nose like this, and because really there's no other explanation. I'm joking now, but they say something like, "Welcome everybody, this is 5123 in London, weather outside is great," and you're there and you go like, what's going on, and why is he even bothering to talk if nobody can understand? Now, one way in which in which you know that you're flying with Emil Dobrovolschi is that you always understand what he's saying. This was actually how we met about 13 years ago. I was on a plane to Rhodos, and we were flying Tarom. Hello, good morning, this is your captain, and we could understand it. It was very good. We stayed in touch ever since, and I met him many times, and he had always interesting stories to share, and we invited him to speak to some of our clients in their business events on topics like leadership and decision-making and crisis management. And I was fascinated to discover not only interesting stories, but also many bridges that can be made with the business world. So about 1.5 years ago, I told him, "Hey, Emil, why don't you write a book, a how-to book? Because there's a lot of treasure of know-how in the aviation industry, in the cockpit, and it would be a pity not to make that available to people in business and to students and to people in sports and to anybody who wants to become better and to achieve more." And his response was, "Hey, Octavian, why don't we write it together?" So this is how the Dark Cockpit book came together. I'd just like to take 2 minutes to describe to you what the title is about, and then I'm going to give the mic to Emil. We had different options for a title, but in the end we stayed with Dark Cockpit because we said, hey, this has everything we're looking for in a title. It's catchy in a way, it's intriguing in a way. We'll have to make a very clear subtitle, which we did to the book. But here's what the Dark Cockpit means. Dark Cockpit is an aviation concept. It's an aviation term for the situation when you're flying and everything is running smoothly. As you know, in cockpit, when you looked left, as Virgil was saying earlier, there's plenty of buttons, there's hundreds of them in screens, and there's lights all over the place. And each light means something. For instance, you can have a white light, which means that something is off. It could be a pump, it could be a generator that is not being used at the time, that's off. And we thought, hey, in life, it happens in the same way. For instance, in a time like this, for a business, your showrooms are off, and some of the people you can't use are on off. You have them, you made the investment in the showrooms and retail and different offices, but they're off. You're not using them for different reasons. Other lights are different colors. For instance, blue means on. It means that we activate an auxiliary system maybe that we need for a while. For instance, the very easy example is a defrosting in the winter. The plane has its own defrosting device and you use it in order to survive and to get the plane working well. And that uses more resources. And we do that in business in the same way. For instance, again, in times of this, there are extra resources that companies are spending on cleaning, on extra staff, on shipping, on things like that. For somebody who's working in a company, it could be overtime. You can do this for a while, but it's unsustainable to have the blue button on all the time. Another light is the amber light, the light orange, which means caution. It means one of the systems of the airplane has a malfunction somewhere. It doesn't mean you can't fly. You can, but you need to be careful. In our life, this could mean a toothache or a headache, for instance. You don't stop working, but you need to be attentive and do something about it rather sooner than later. For a business, a caution can be maybe that the payment terms of your customers are growing longer and longer, and it takes more and more time for you to see your money. And there's the light nobody wants to see, the warning light, the red light, which means that the engine is on fire, there's a system failure, and you need to stop and deal with that immediately. For a business, it could mean, in a situation like this, revenues are down, business or supply chain is down, cash, we're out of cash, or things like that. And we found this to be a very good parallel between aviation and between real life for us as humans, but also for us as businesses. And the term is, how was your flight? Oh, it was dark cockpit all the way. How was your business last year? Oh, it was dark cockpit all the year. I think we can agree that for a month or so, none of us have been in a dark cockpit. We coined the term in the book. We say the opposite. What is the opposite of dark cockpit? We call it Christmas cockpit, with lights going on and off all the time, and with your attention needed in 5 or 10 different places in the same time. So this is an overview of the book. And I'm glad to have the chance to meet with you guys. And I'll pass the mic to Emil, and he'll share with you a few interesting things. And hopefully this will provide ideas to you. But please, if you have any questions, please use the Zoom chat function and write them there so we can see and we can start answering them. We don't really plan to talk for the entire hour. We plan to talk maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes, we'll see. But the more questions you ask, the better and the more dynamic this call will be. So this is now for me, and I'll pass the mic to Emil.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you here. Normally, I'm starting a conversation or a relation with you. You'll hear my voice on the speakers, on the cabin speakers. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome on board. So welcome on our conference, video conference. I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Octavian, for the nice intro. These days, there's no dark cockpit anymore. Not in my aircraft, not in, I don't know, maybe in some business. But in aviation, everything is down. So for the moment, it's a Christmas cockpit. So it's very hard to manage. You have all the lights on, so it's very hard to check if the things are going as you plan. So yesterday I had a flight. So I went to Charles de Gaulle for a humanitarian flight. Generally speaking, I have 3 functions in my company. One of the most important is as a pilot. So I'm a captain. As a captain, my contract with the company is very, very simple. I have to bring an aircraft. It's a machine of maybe 100, 200, 300 million euros machine. I have to take it from point A to B with passengers and luggage and mail and cargo from A to B safely, in a safely, timely, and comfortable manner. So yesterday I had a humanitarian flight to Charles de Gaulle Airport in France. As a pilot, for me, my cockpit, the real cockpit was in dark cockpit. We were 3 in it, but we were dressed in overalls. We had goggles, we had masks, so communication was difficult. Let's call it the dark cockpit. But then when we returned, we had to take about 40 prisoners. We have half of the aircraft was full of police. We had some humanitarian, half of the aircraft passengers with some disease. We even had a 6-year-old boy who was unattended. He came with us home to Romania. It took 2 hours and 40 minutes to bring the passengers on board because everyone has to be checked. We lost our slot for departure. Everybody got nervous except for the pilots because we had to fly the aircraft back home. So this is a kind of activity when you have to take not just what you're paid to do, but you had lots of things to check, lots of things to manage. You have to keep the communication with your cabin personnel, the flight attendants. I had to keep contact with the police on board because we had to check the passengers for 2 screens. We had to screen them for health, and we had doctors on board, but also for behavioral, let's say, screening, because there were some dangerous guys between those 40 prisoners. So this was my pilot. This is my pilot part of the job. The other part of the job, the second one, I'm a TRI, so I'm a type rating instructor. And in this side of my job, I have to train people to become, I train young people, professional pilots to become professional on a type rated aircraft, like I'm flying Airbuses. So I type rate, I'm since 2001, I'm an instructor, and I train lots of people, all ages. The TRI is type rating instructor. And this activity, it's half done in a ground school and half in a full flight simulator, which is a cockpit of aircraft with 6 struts, electro-pneumatic struts. And inside it's a cockpit, and all the sounds, it's a replica, it's a 100% replica of a cockpit. Inside of it, the pilots, they will have all the feelings, they will hear, they will see, they will feel exactly like an aircraft. Behind them, there's an instructor, and from the instructor operating seat, using the features that are presented in the simulator for instructor, you can induce defects to the aircraft. You can induce the forces. The pilots will feel exactly taking off, landing. If they're landing smooth, it's a nice smooth landing. If it's a hard landing, they will feel a hard landing. The rain, the snow, fire on the engine, smoke in the cockpit, all kinds of malfunctions. You have to train them in simulator sessions, which are 4 hours each session for 13 sessions. This is my job as a instructor in the simulator, and then I have to train those people in the aircraft. Some of the training is done without passengers, and the rest is line training under supervision, and there's an instructor in the seat, and the trainee, it's a captain or a co-pilot, is in the other seat operating the aircraft under the supervision of the instructor. The last side of my job, I'm a TRE now, which is type rating examiner. So on behalf of Romanian Civil Aviation Authority, I have to check pilots if they reach a level of proficiency, if they are able to fly an aircraft. So I check them for knowledge, I check them for skill, for attitude, and I have to sign, and the Romanian Aviation Authority will, and nowadays, because we are in the European Union, I endorsed my TRE license, and I also signed for different pilots from different countries in the UAE. This is the most boring part, because I have to check them. I facilitate the communication, but I have to check them if they are at the proper level. And I have lots of books telling me how to do it. But the last question I had always in my mind is, if I trust if those people are able to fly my family from point A to point B as a pilot, I will sign for them to have a license as a professional pilot. Now, one of the most important and one of the most complex malfunction we encounter in the aircraft, it's a hydraulic malfunction. What's a hydraulic system? The aircraft has quite a few actually systems, like electrical, power plant, flight controls, pneumatic, but the most important, in my opinion, is the hydraulic. It's so important that the constructor of the aircraft, they put 3 systems in the aircraft. So we have 3 hydraulic systems which they operate independent from each other. They are not close to each other, so in case of an explosion or a rupture in the fuselage, they will not be affected, all of them. They're like the muscles of the body, you know. Without hydraulic, this piece of metal, with this tube of metal with wings, instead of flying across the sky, will drop like a rock. So it's so important that they put 3. We are sometimes, when in a normal flight, when one of the circuits malfunction, It's an amber light is it's a caution, as Octavian said before, and there's not it doesn't require the immediate action of the pilot, but it's like a thing to keep in mind, because it will affect the landing distance, it will affect the V approach, the final approach speed, it will affect the aircraft configuration. So all from the sudden, without one of the three, which are redundant to each other, you have to choose carefully a suitable airport to land. Maybe it's the destination airport, maybe you have to go to an alternate. So all from the sudden, the pilots are in not the dark cockpit anymore. The cockpit is dark, but when they look up on the overhead panel, they will see an amber light. Immediately they will identify the malfunction. Now, I never read or never heard about two of the systems to malfunction to get all together. But on each simulator session, we have a dual hydraulic malfunction. And based on that, because there are three, all from now, it's a more complicated situation. We have land ASAP in red, which the pilots, they will have to call Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Mayday, it's a call for emergency situation when the life, it's a life at stake. When you call it, the traffic control will alert the ground services, all the ambulances in that area, all the search and rescue services are alerted. So it's a great responsibility, and it goes to the captain to call Mayday. In this situation, in the simulator, it's so complex. It's so many things you have to do before landing that it takes about 40 to 45 minutes to finish it. So we call it Mayday. The controller, we said, one of my friends, which is a controller, asked me once, he said, we had a Mayday, and these pilots, they, instead of coming immediately to land, he said, they stayed for about 40 minutes. And I said, yeah, it was a Mayday and the land as soon as possible. It wasn't a crash as soon as possible, you know? So you have to prepare, because you have only you don't have the responsibility. Your job as a manager, as a captain, doesn't end when you finish the landing and you go home. This piece of fine aviation industry, with this aircraft, which costs, I told you, hundreds of millions of euros, has to fly tomorrow because you have a business. You need it for other flights. You are in a system. All the colleagues will suffer if one of the aircraft crashes or stay grounded for a while. So for this situation, the hydraulic, the most unexperienced pilot at the beginning of their career, they will say, okay, let's go. It's written on the aircraft, land ASAP, let's go to land. And I said, no. First of all, you need, and they hyperventilated that because the aircraft, all of a sudden, the flight controls doesn't work as previously. Every time you turn, there will be a pitch up or pitch down effect. So it's sluggish, the aircraft, it's difficult to control. So everybody's so stressed, and the pressure on them, it's high, because, and even if I'm instructor, even if I'm an examiner, I see the pressure for those pilots because they want to perform well. Normally we let this exercise for the last part of the session, of the simulator session, because after a while they will feel stressed, and it's not a good idea to continue after dual hydraulic to continue with other exercises, you know. So all the time when I'm training them, I said, okay, it's a complex case. It's very difficult to handle the aircraft. It's never happened in the real life. But if it happened, what you'll do? They know what to do, because I hear a lot of saying, which are funny, you know, you need the proper mindset. Yeah, good. But you have to know what to do all, at the same time, isn't it? It's not just I like these sayings all the time. I hear nowadays, because I'm staying home a lot, and reading a lot. I'm hearing a lot of saying which are funny, but they don't work anymore, you know. But talking about the proper mindset, the mindset for a complex case like this is to see what is working. So first of all, you have two good engines. So you have traction and you have lift. The aircraft is flying, isn't it? Good. first of all. Secondly, the human resources, you have two pilots, isn't it? You can share between the task or you have a task sharing, each one has an area of responsibility. So we are not alone, and you're trained, you're professional pilots. So what we have, it's a good aircraft which has two engines. You have electricity, you have pressurization, so nobody dies of hypoxia, okay? Yes, you can handle it harder, but if you press the controls, the aircraft descends, yes. If you turn it, respond to your commands, yes. It's a sluggish response, but it can control it, isn't it? Now, you can fly it, you can live in it, let's prepare for landing. Okay, so we take it step by step because you have to take a short-term decision, first of all, when the crisis strikes you, because you have to fly it first. Okay, let's fly. Let's not drop from the sky. Secondly, you have to navigate your aircraft somewhere. You have to make a long-term decision. Okay, now I'm flying, I'm not crashing. Where I'm going? What destination should I choose? I have to do some calculation. How many passengers? Where am I? If I'm going to a destination where I have no commercial representative, I will pay a lot for the passengers to reroute them, because this is the ticket I'm selling. I'm selling a ticket for a passenger to bring it to fly it from A to B. If I'm landing at sea, it's my responsibility to put the passenger on other aircraft, which sometimes on other companies, which is not in alliance with us, so I pay a lot. I have to put them in the hotel, maybe. I have to pay them a meal. So all this, it's a commercial pressure also on the captain's shoulders. So all this to make the decision. And in aviation, we never say, I made the decision, or now I came with this. We call it, we built the decision. So I am taking all the information I have. First of all, let's solve mechanically the case, the crisis. And then I have to take all the information I need from the air traffic controllers. I have to take all the information I need from the other pilot, from the flight attendants, the crew. In my job, what I like in my job is that when we close the door of my aircraft, I know for sure we are a team. We are really a team, because nobody's in plus there, nobody's in minus. If everyone counts, even the last, maybe the unexperienced first officer, or maybe the last flight attendant in the rear of the aircraft. And you have to take information from everyone in order to build your decisions. Sometimes the captain does nothing. You can see it there. The aircraft is flown by the first officer because there's no autopilot, there's no automation of the thrust of the engines, and the captain does nothing. He just puts his chairs. He pulled his chairs to have a better overview and builds his decision. Of the unexperienced captains or managers, they will try to do everything by themselves, okay? Because they are the best, and that's why they are the managers. They are the best. In my case, they have 4 stripes. So I'm the captain, but I'm not an orchestra man. Okay, sometimes it's better to let the aircraft be flown by a co-pilot, or use automation if you have it, in order to let me think better. Sometimes, if you are chilling down the cockpit, sometimes the best decision comes from your co-pilot. In my job, we encourage this. We grow up we encourage our first officers to talk, to come out with their opinions. Of course, they are less experienced than the captains, but sometimes maybe they have a better idea, and you take it. And you said, okay, perfect, this is a good idea, and we'll proceed accordingly to your input. So to return to my hydraulic case, so it's not a crash ASAP, it's a land ASAP. You need time to prepare to land. You need time to see what you have, not what you don't have, and to prepare the aircraft for landing, and in such a way not to break landing gear, not to overshoot the runway, or to crash. Okay? Octavian.
let me just emphasize, and Emil, if you see the chat, there is one question there. Let me just emphasize, guys, that we chose this example because we thought, hey, what is this coronavirus? Maybe in some ways it looks like a hydraulic system failure. So many things are not going the way they should be going. And the temptation is to do all kinds of different things. But still, what are the best captains doing? They rely on what they have, whether it's the engine, whether it's the co-pilot and the crew, or someone else in the team. And this must be something that we should be doing as well. And if I may just comment on the land ASAP versus crash ASAP, we see some companies, because they have no revenues or very little revenues now, they make so drastic cuts of costs that it doesn't look like a land ASAP, which will be able to continue the business, but it looks in many ways like a crash ASAP, meaning, yes, we will bring the cost down to revenues, but how will that make us be able to fly again in the autumn or in 1 year or in the next years to come? So there are many situations, just like the failure of the hydraulic systems, that we can learn from as people who are not flying actually an airplane, but we're flying a business, we're flying a family, a team, or even our own self-life. Yeah. Emil, would you like to answer the question? We have a question from Adrian.
Thank you for the question. It's a very tough times for aviation now. Even though some parts of aviation, like general aviation or business aviation, grow 4 times these 2 months. But the rest of it, it's down. The cargo flights, they drop like 25 to 27%. Even though in this field there's a growth in pharmaceutical cargo flights from India and China all over the world. But the rest is down by 80%, 85%. The best, I read today some declaration of the BA, British Airways CEO. They said that they need maybe 1 year or 2 to recover. And also this, the Lufthansa CEO said the same. So these days, I don't think if the states, they will not help the companies to cope. The workforce, the pilots, technicians, flight attendants, they're highly skilled. So if you lose this skill of a pilot, you cannot start it in 30 days. If a pilot doesn't fly for 30 days, the 31st day, he had to fly with an instructor for a line check to see if his skill or her skill is at what is required, a standard, a marginal standard at least. So imagine grounding hundreds, thousands of pilots, and then if you want to restart the industry, it's impossible to restart it like this, because it's impossible to put 2 unexperienced guys next to each other in a cockpit. Not even when the weather is good. What if there's bad weather outside? What if they have some malfunctions in the cockpit? How they will cope? So it's very difficult. It's difficult because if you lose this workforce, it's very hard to put it back in the cockpit. To have a good captain on a jet aircraft takes for a company at least 5 years. 5 years to have a young captain in the cockpit, if not more. Okay, so in my company it takes maybe 8 years to have a good captain in the seat. To have an instructor, you need 10 years of flying as a good captain to be an instructor. So imagine if you lose this workforce, the industry will not recover very soon, I guess.
Emil, while you please read the upcoming questions, let me add a comment and an invitation for people. Emil said earlier that the general aviation is up 4 times. General aviation means small private planes. So not the 70 million private jets, but the 4-seaters, the 6-seaters, for which you need a PPL, a private pilot license. They are up 4 times, April 2020 versus April 2019. So if some of you were passionate about flying and you were waiting for an impulse from outside to get and do it, now is the time. because you'll be able to have the freedom to move from A to B with your families or colleagues, most likely in an easier way from now on.
I read the question about the ground-to-air missiles coming to aircraft. You have nothing, you cannot do nothing. The aircraft flies with maybe 0.81, 0.84 Mach, and the missiles fly at least 2 times that speed. And it's impossible to avoid it. So, but the good news is that most of the ground-to-air missiles, they don't reach 12,000 meters, so they don't reach 39,000 feet. Okay, the aircraft, the level aircraft flies normally.
Super.
Emil, Harris here. How do you see in terms of strategy the whole industry? For example, we see that some kind of upstarts like Booking is going about to acquire a kind of an aviation company in Saudi Arabia, based also because of the fact of the oil is too low. So there are some opportunities popping up, and from my perspective as a kind of strategy guy, I see that they will be playing some M&As. What do you see in Europe? How, this will affect the morale of the existing people that they work in the industry? If you can elaborate a bit, I will really appreciate it.
First of all, it's very difficult to maintain an airliner. The activity is very, a few years ago, when they had a good year, even though the aviation industry, they contribute with about 10 to 15% of the GDP worldwide. The margin of profit is 1.2, 1.3. And there were times, because of the price of the oil, or because of the price of insurance maybe, when there was no profit for years. And something like this comes on, and I told you that the aircraft is very expensive. And mostly around it, the aircraft is very expensive. The crew to maintain and pay, it's very expensive. And train, the maintenance is expensive because you have to do it every day, every month, or major checks, which costs huge amounts of money. The insurance is high, so this cost around an aircraft makes it with a very little profit, margin of profit. And yeah, I can see opportunity in this, but nowadays you can buy aircraft because they're not on the waiting list anymore like before. If you want to buy an Airbus now, you can buy an Airbus. If you want to buy a Boeing, they're on the tarmac waiting for you to buy it. But I don't see a recover soon, because there are different stages over the year, and we lost one of the most important one now. I don't see the holiday industry to recover soon, and which is an important part of the transport, the air transport.
Yeah. Another thing, and I couldn't agree more with you, is exactly as you said. I have been interviewed in the past by McKinsey. In one of the cases was in airline industry, and by crunching the numbers, we realized that if you are a European airline industry, you need to have 60% capacity in order one flight to be profitable. Having said that, and according to social distancing measures that is applied to every industry, how do you see a bit of, kind of future thought? If we wake up after 5 years, are gonna be, airplanes like with social, that count 2 people per S, and do you have some ideas how a future airplane would look like, or do you believe that it will not be, or it can be produced from big players like Airbus and so forth, or do you see just as it is a bit of recovery 3-5 years, and then nothing innovation, no digital transformation, no product development of the existing aircrafts? How do you see the industry evolving?
First of all, I think that this coronavirus crisis will end soon. Otherwise, if you start thinking that it will stay with us for years, nobody can tell you how the future will look like. But I'm an optimistic, and I feel this summer we'll get rid of this virus thing. So we can start flying again, because if you fly an aircraft with a social distancing, yesterday when I told you I flew to a humanitarian flight, and we were all dressed in overalls with goggles, which they become wet. It makes you not see well, and we have masks. And the passengers, we gave them masks and gloves. And then when they get out, they get in the bus, and there was no social distancing between them. They were like close to each other. So we cannot control this social distancing thing in an aircraft, to be honest.
Octavian, Emil, hi, nice to see you here online. I have one question, which is very important from one perspective. During this problem, the measure that both you and Octavian mentioned before, that the companies are taking, it's very important how the people are reacting, meaning the employee and the teams. Now, all of us know already that the pilots syndicate is something very strong and powerful, and if they want to mess our world, they can do it easily. I'm very curious to see how they are looking at this situation, and how cooperative are they, and how deep is their understanding and their support for the future recovery of this industry, from business perspective especially, and the future, of course.
For the moment, in my company, in my fleet, we are only 11% of the pilots flying. The rest of them, they went home with 90% off their salary, or the income they had in March, like. So there are tough times, and I'm also in the union, a pilot union, and I see them. They look for the future, you know, because if you do now, what can you do now? To put pressure on who? They understand the situation, and we all hope for the next month to be better. So now, if I do some union action now, I will just put more weight on the shoulder of the company shoulder. It will not solve a thing. And I read, because we are now associated with some trade unions from outside, from UE, from the United States, and they all agree on that. No union actions for the moment. Everybody's waiting to see what is going on.
Maybe a good way to look at the situation is to look ahead, and also responding to Charis's question earlier, is to look ahead and look at two periods. The first period is the one that we are in, which lasts until either the virus naturally slows down, or there's a medicine that you can take, or a vaccine. Until then, it's probably very fuzzy and very turbulent, and it's what we're feeling now. And then the second period is what happens afterward, when we can say, oh yeah, the coronavirus, if you had it, take this, go to medicine, you'll have a treatment for that. And this period is very turbulent, and this period does not look good in any way for the travel industry. And even when the second period starts, this first period will have some consequences on the second period, because now you cannot fly. You want to fly, but you cannot. But maybe in the spring of 2021, you won't have the money to do it. The flight will be there because you don't have a job, or people in large masses will not have a job and will not afford to fly halfway around the world, or to 2,000 kilometers away for a holiday, but they will still have to stay home because their budgets are down. Or maybe because some of the largest companies, which occupy many of the airplane seats throughout the world, they'll say, hey, we did it so well in these virtual things, whether it was Zoom and WebEx and so on, why don't we keep doing that? And only, instead of flying 5 times a month, let's just fly once a year for that big particular summit. So overall, the aviation industry has a big question mark on it, which makes it very disappointing, because up until last year, if you looked at the order books of both Boeing, even with the problems with the 737 MAX and also to Airbus, the airline looked completely different. There was no, and we were discussing with Emil that there are not enough pilots in the world to be able to fly the planes that were ordered and paid for or hard signed for in the coming years. So it's interesting how that industry shifted in just 6 months. And the question, of course, we're curious about the industry. We love to fly, we love to be in places and everything, but we should be even more careful when we look at to see about our own businesses. What will happen to our own businesses, to our own staff, to our own union, whatever teams we have in Ourself, and think about what will happen from now on for that. Any other questions, my friends?
And if I can,
please go ahead.
If I can ask something. Many of you had the kind of incidents like with Ryanair, especially with low barriers, kind of low-cost firms, that, you know, kind of customer obsession is not on their core business. So we have the big companies and we have this kind of low firms that they don't care about you. How the customer obsession in terms of mindset is going to play out after this crisis? I am very curious to learn, you know, your buy-in on this.
Would you like to go first, Emil, or shall I?
No, please. Okay.
Yeah. So there's and you're correct in observing that in the past years, these low-cost companies, and let me just speak for a few moments about them because Emil wouldn't. He's so polite and his integrity level is so high. He would not do it. There were so many corners cut in the operation of these airlines, keeping safety and keeping everything, but not providing 1 penny extra. That is just amazing. Let me just give you an example. Again, Emil will not give this example because he's too okay to do that. But for instance, there's something that is known as the daily check of an airplane. The daily check. Now, the daily check of an airplane needs to be done daily because that's the name daily comes from. But the book, because the people are wise and the people are experienced, the book says, if for some reason you cannot do it daily, then as an exception, you can do it every 36 hours. So you land the plane in Siberia somewhere, there's no crew, it's 3 a.m. in the morning and nobody, okay, can do it. Some of the low-cost airlines, as a practice, they're not doing the daily check daily, but they're doing the daily check every 36 hours. And that's the rule. And the exception is that they do it daily. So they've pushed all the rules and regulations to the max. And also the incident a few years ago with the German Wings when the pilot went out to the restroom and the co-pilot stayed in and he took the pilot. You probably remember the incident. That was again because many corners were cut. So from a certain point of view, as a passenger, we cannot be happy that this coronavirus is happening, but we can hope that as things move on, they will again begin to care for what matters most, and that is safety, and is the happiness and the joy and the what is the name? The not the happy, yeah, the happy. Let's call it the happiness of the
customer satisfaction.
Yeah, customer satisfaction. Yes, I couldn't find the word. So we can hope, but what we can see now is that their priority now and in the coming months, the priority is to make some kind of money with cargo. You see many planes doing routes with cargo, passenger planes. They were converted planes, seats taken out and converted to cargo planes. Their focus now is to make some money, but hopefully in the second period that I mentioned earlier, when you will be able to fly legally and social distancing and the medicine is your pocket, so everything is fine. Will you want to fly, or will you say, oh, let me just take my car to Greece and let me drive from Bucharest to Vienna again, or maybe even to Italy rather than fly? Then the attracting customers will probably become again important for airlines, and they will focus on providing the value that we were used to years ago and that in some of the companies we lost in the recent years.
Let me about your question, the no-frills companies, they are run by some very smart entrepreneur, okay? So they will try to cut the costs on each item they can. it's not something to judge or to punish, isn't it? But if you let them be, their imagination will go up to what the CEO of Ryanair proposed a few years ago, and he tried to convince the European Union and all the states that it's feasible, is that you can put more passengers in aircraft if they just lean standing up to a seat. Okay, so you can put more passengers like this, standing up, leaning back on a seat, not sitting down. And he was serious. He was not joking about it. So this kind of let's say imagination has to be cut by regulators, by the states, because otherwise they will look for money and they will cut costs wherever they can on destroying, let's say, the joy of flight, destroying the joy of being a pilot to the company. Because I'm telling you, if you ask one of the pilots in one of the low-cost carriers, they will tell you the only thing that there is the money. It's not the joy of working there, because they are a number. Okay, so they the only thing they enjoy is the money, and they know they put big money on the pilot payroll. Okay, and the system is very well done. They buy mostly new aircraft because they are aircraft dealers. They play the big two constructors against each other, Boeing and Airbus, and they say, okay, we'll buy 50, I buy 100 aircraft. In 5 years, they can sell it to a price, to, let's say, to another company with huge amounts of money. And they will run only or fly only with new aircraft, which is one part of the deal, but they are not quite airliners. They are, there's a business which has a component of aircraft dealer. It's a business which has a part of, they're very agile, and they behave somehow in Romania because the legislation may be here, and they permit to be sometimes dishonest, the different way they act in Germany. No?
Anyway, I think we'll remember that traveling was part of the journey when we were kids. It was war. In the recent years, it was not that you really wanted, let's get there. I'm sitting and I'm bumped and there's no, anyway, for us, I personally look forward to flying again. And I think that many of you do too. And we will enjoy the experience of flight, be afraid. Emil, there's a question there. Hi there, these days cargo rates went sky high. Can a commercial airplane become a cargo airplane?
Yeah, it can become, but because the costs are huge. There are hundreds of thousands of euros to convert your aircraft from passenger aircraft to a freighter. Why? Because it's a matter of balance. It's a matter of approval from the state, matter of approval from the manufacturer of the aircraft, and then you have to use qualified men, highly skilled. Everything is double checked, so it takes a while and costs a lot.
Any other questions, friends?
I have also another question. I know that during our meetings we have a very nice parallel between what a leader in aviation like Emil is doing during a very, let's say, tight situation. Looking at what we are going through in this moment, is that parallel still available?
It's still available, but thank you for the question. You know, there are lots of
please detail a bit, because some of our colleagues perhaps don't know, and that would be very interesting, even though for the sake of gamification, just ask them, just ask a question, you know, during.
As I told you at the beginning of my speech today, I told you about the simulator session we go, and we train some of the malfunctions that never happen and might never happen in a pilot's life. But we still train them because we need the pilot to be prepared in that case. Some of those impossible malfunctions are considered more important, so we train them more often, okay? But coming back to what you asked, there are lots of saying which now they look funny like haha, not like odd, yeah? Because it was a NASA astronaut, and he said something like, a superior pilot uses his superior judgment to avoid situations which require the use of his or her superior skill, which doesn't work anymore because nobody trained us to fly once a month and the flight not to be a normal one. Nobody trained us for COVID. I was grounded for a month or so, and I thought a lot about it because I'm trained, and what I train in people, in a captain, I want to see this kind of judgment because I try to make him a leader all the time, not that just the boss in the aircraft. I want him to be followed by people and to him to be open and to listen to what the people want to say in emergency situation, especially. And we didn't train for this COVID. We didn't train. It's a situation. I went a few days ago. I went to Munich, and I saw a graveyard of aircraft. There were like hundreds of Lufthansa aircraft parked in a huge airport, Munich airport. A month ago, I was in Heathrow, and you know how busy is Heathrow. You cannot land in Heathrow because your parking spot is not free yet. So they count each minute in order to make the machine work, the mechanism work. Now, some of the taxiways, which are 4 kilometers of them, parallel, lots of them, dozens of them, they're full of parked aircraft. We were the only ones there, 2 other aircraft. Yesterday in Paris, a graveyard of Air France aircraft. Nobody trained me for that. Yeah, I did my job as a pilot. I had to use my leadership because there were lots of things there. And everybody in my aircraft, I had a medical team, I had some policemen, I had some air marshals. Each of them, they have their own goal, but I have to put them all together because sometimes there were contradicting things between them. So I had to manage that and my flight, which wasn't a normal flight, by the way. I was dressed. I had 2 pair of gloves. My touchscreen worked very, very hard. I was sweating between that. My visibility was obscured. So it wasn't an easy flight for me, and I had to manage all the things behind me. Nobody trained me for that. I have like 13,000 hours total flight time experience, and I have more than 6,000 hours in the simulator, but nobody trained me for this. So in these times, a real leader will find the resources to rely, especially on in my opinion, on the workforce, on the colleagues, and then not to crash. Fly the aircraft, navigate the aircraft. If you want to finish it tomorrow, yeah, you can land it now and call it finished. But if you are planning to stay in this business or on your business if you want to fly the next year or the next years, you have to use your skills, because every leader, every manager has developed this skill. He knows, sometimes he studies, sometimes he had lots of hours, experience hours, lots of emergency situations behind him. So he had this experience, but nobody trained you for this. Nobody trained to stay on the ground for a month and then to fly.
Maybe this is the time where all those hours of experience are being fully used, because if you didn't have those, you probably would not have even been asked to fly that plane yesterday. And maybe because I see where it's 6 o'clock, we're fine with time, but if we're coming to an end, maybe a quote is good here. It comes from Rudy Giuliani, whose personal branding is not at its best in these past years. But when he was a mayor of New York City, people asked him, okay, how were you able to manage all that stuff? And he said, hey, we were never faced with things like this before, terrorist attack. But he said we did have fires in skyscrapers before. We did have situations of power outage before. We did have situations of major accidents and push for hospitals before. We did have small planes coming into the, it's just that these were all together now. And the quote I was thinking of is, prepare for anything you can anticipate, and you will be prepared for what you cannot anticipate. And I think this is just as valid for us today, both for Emil, but also for us in our businesses. Let's see what we can anticipate with not much, but let's see what we can anticipate and prepare for each scenario separately and for each item separately. We will be even better prepared for the things that we can not anticipate, because the future is very hard to see these days. Any other questions or comments, guys? Yeah,
we do have time, and if there are more questions, we'll address them. I wanted to say something from the beginning. Check-in is open, but not check-in in the flight, but check-in in our app. So please do check in in the app. I saw a question that also kind of Haris mentioned it. You guys are trained for contingency plans. It's not everything that is in the simulator that, you know, it's gonna be something that you have to do. The simulator does, as Tavi said, train you for what you put in front of the pilots, but it also gets you used to this uncertainty. Because yes, you train some, but you expect the worst. And this is something like that. So Roland put it a question a little bit before we jumped over, because as I said, Haris put it, how is gonna be what you guys plan for the future now that maybe thinking of how to pick up back with the passengers flight, how you see that in social distancing?
You mean what are companies like Tarom doing in these times to prepare for the?
Because now you know, those lean back on the seats is not going to apply, because it's not you cannot do that. So for so many reasons, and as we joked yesterday, I'm interested because of my height and my legroom. I didn't have legroom anymore.
So for you, standing up, it will work.
on those two levels, you know,
on the double decker, the Airbus A380. Yes,
so on that for sure.
So again, I'm not sure this the aviation will survive this social distancing. It doesn't end soon. It's impossible to fly, because look, the break even, if you run your company well, if you have trained pilots, which they don't ruin the aircraft, okay? If you have trained flight attendants, if you have skilled technicians, and you have a commercial department which works nicely, a financial department will make good investments, the break-even point, at the end of the day, it's between 60 and 70%. So you have to fill up the aircraft with 60 to 70%. If you have an aircraft of 100-seater, you need 60 to 70 passengers to break even. With the social distancing, 1/3 of the seater, so all from the sudden you have only 60 seats available. They cannot cut from pilot training. It's costly. It costs you a lot. The flight simulator costs a lot, and you have to do the training every 6 months. You have to do a session of training. You have to do a session of evaluation each 6 months for each pilot. On top of this, you have to transport the pilots to the simulator. If you have a simulator, a machine in your yard costs you millions. It's 10, 15 millions euros as a full flight simulator. So you have to transport them, you have to give them accommodation, per diems, and so forth. So all on top of each other, you say, okay, it's too much, we have to cut costs from the pilot training. It's impossible. Because if one pilot, which is not trained properly, crash one of the aircraft, your business goes down immediately, because the customer they will not trust you anymore. If you have a bad name in the industry, nobody will fly with you. So again, the technician side, if you say, okay, we don't need 3, let's put 2 technicians, they would work hard. It's like in the cockpit, in the dark cockpit, you have the on button. You cannot sustain it for long. It's the on button is like we work overtime. You cannot work overtime all the time. You will ruin your health. It will ruin your attention. At the end, your product will not be good. So you'll not be. Your product will not come out a good product if you stay overtime all the time. If you have on buttons all the time in your cockpit. So it's impossible to cut corners in aviation because they will cost you. And I have lots of stories because as I said in the book, and as we wrote it, in aviation, all the rules we have now, they were written with blood. Because in the beginning, the authorities were not so strong, and everybody did what they want. In parts of the world, even now, the authorities are not very strong, and you see crashes all the time. There are some companies on the blacklist; they are not allowed to fly to Europe, and things like this. You cannot cut corners here.
There are discussions about the states financing that 1/3 of the planes, but nothing is really decided because that's not were very well feasible yesterday. One of IATA's newsletters yesterday talked about cargo, and it was a call for airliners to convert more, for airways companies to convert more of their planes to cargo, because capacity went down 22%, demand only went down 15%, so there needs to be compensated. So it's still a lot of work in progress from many perspectives. But as I see in the comments, Javier, for instance, we do not want any cut in pilot training, in the same way we do not want cuts in doctor training or in lawyer training. Of course we don't. So it's hard to have everything. But we'll see. Probably time will tell what will happen to this industry and how many companies will survive, and how. Yeah, maybe they'll survive in different ways. But we'll see how that will happen.
Hello, Irina. Thank you for your question, and thank you for rising a little bit of to a more optimistic tone. I always wanted to fly. Even now, when I'm sitting somewhere, if I hear noise, I can identify the aircraft. I'm breaking my neck to see what aircraft is. So it was my dream as a child to become a pilot, and for me, it's not a hobby. This, it's not something you do in your free time. As a professional pilot, I'm very serious about it, but I'm enjoying it a lot. I enjoy all of it. It's not an easy job because I have lots of things to do, but I like to solve complicated things, and as I like to read a complicated book. Okay.
Question. You said before that if a pilot doesn't fly for 30 days, he will lose some of his skills. Maybe it's also similar to what we're experiencing now. So we are in lockdown for over 30 days, 45 days. And we business people, some of us stay for a long time at home. Our schedule is not the same. My question is, what would you recommend us? I mean, you seem to come from an industry where there's a lot of rigor and protocol. How shall we keep ourselves sane and healthy during these times?
As I told you, as an examiner, when I'm going to the simulator, I examine the people under 3 magnifier glasses. One of them is the knowledge. Okay, so as a professional, always there'll be a part of knowledge you have to perform well. It's not the knowledge when you tell to some young people, this will be a job you have to learn all your life. They will jump over the window, isn't it? But we are learning every day, actually. You don't have to read back all the college books, but you read to, what I suggest, and what I suggested to my pilots nowadays, because they are grounded, I told them, read all the time, read the procedures, read about the aircraft systems, because when you go back in the aircraft, you'll be a little bit rusty. Okay, so you need to rely on your superior knowledge, because if you don't read anything, you go in the cockpit, which is a little bit unfamiliar with you. And if everything goes well and it's a dark cockpit, you're lucky. But what if something goes wrong? And as always, when something goes wrong, things are connected to each other. So when something bad happens, an incident or an accident in aviation, you can find lots of coincidences. Let's call it like this. You are tired, you are not prepared well, your knowledge level is low, your skill level is low. So let's see the full part of the glass. What you have to do, read a lot about your job, read a lot about what others are saying about their jobs, how they are coping these days. And having so much time and internet, I don't see why not to read about it. The skill part, you cannot train. You cannot train other than flying in my job, or other than going into a simulator, which is, I told you, reproduces 99% of what the pilot feels and seems exactly like a real aircraft. And the last part, which is most important, and for an examiner, this is the the most important thing is the attitude. Because if you can train anybody if you want to arise your knowledge level, I give you more books and you can read. If I want to train you, I can train my 15-year-old son to land. My mother, she's 82, I can teach her in a simulator how to land. I will land with her 100 times and I'm telling you, she will land. She will land. So the skill is, again, something you can train. What you cannot train is the attitude. The proper attitude, how to communicate, it's very important. How to be assertive, because everybody's, I told you, lots of sayings, like in a Facebook, superior pilot. No, it doesn't work anymore. A proper mindset. Okay, what to do next? What's your plan exactly? What's your plan? What you want to do? A superior, no, it doesn't work anymore. So the attitude is something which you cannot read about it. If you try to learn it from a book, it's impossible. It will come out of your experience, it will come out of your knowledge of the aircraft, knowledge on how to behave in a group, in a team, how to deal with malfunctions, how to put people together for an outcome. This is so my advice is to read a lot and to try to be assertive, open, communicate with people in your team, be honest. This is my advice.
Thank you for that. I see there are no more questions. Tavi and Emil, thanks a lot for your speech. It's great to take a left into the cockpit. Again, dark cockpit, it's a journey. It's a journey to that cockpit dream, and to the processes and to all the stories. Thank you for the first-hand story, and we really appreciate that. Friends, I wish you good days. So first of all, Emil and Octavian, thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. It was a pleasure to be with you.